Welcome to the only nightly show in Metro Detroit covering all things people, power, and politics. This is The Pulse. I'm Raj. It's a mad sprint to November 5th, T-minus 28 days as candidates make their last-minute pushes for your vote in this battleground state that'll help decide who is heading to the White House. Now to a huge race, though, in our state, the race for Senate. Rogers and Elissa Slotkin squaring off on the debate stage in Grand Rapids tonight. We'll show you what they had to say. And a media blitz by Vice President Harris. She's been criticized for not doing enough interviews. Now she's done several in the last few days, some traditional, some not. We'll show you where she's making her case for her candidacy. But the last leg on this marathon to Election Day got us wondering, what issue do you still want to hear more from these two candidates, Vice President Harris and former President Trump? As we always say, this show is truly about you, so we hit the streets to get a pulse check from you.
I want to hear them say something about helping the students get rid of their student debt.
Most important issue for me is the border. I'm most concerned about ending the incredibly unregulated influx of migration across our border. I don't think our country can withstand unregulated foreign migration. And we can't have another 3 years of it.
I would want to hear talk about the elections and that it wasn't stolen and that democracy in this country works.
And you want to hear both sides talk about that?
Yes, I think voting is very important, and that should be participation in the government.
From both candidates, I feel like I would like to hear some substantive debate about the economy. It's supposedly the number one issue for all folks who gathered here today. Well, number one behind immigration, and yet the economic policies that Trump and the Republicans provide, anything that they ever provide, is always favoring billionaires.
By the way, if you see me around town with my cell phone and I want to talk to you and you want to talk to me about politics, just walk up and ask, and we can actually put you on the pulse. We do it all the time. We also asked you the question on fox2detroit.com, just in case we didn't see you in person today. If you'd like to weigh in, you know the drill. Just scan that QR code on the bottom right of your screen. So far, most of you say the economy. Turning now to the race for Senate and the two candidates, Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin and former Congressman U.S. Ambassador Rogers, squaring off in Beer City, USA. The first Senate debate was held in Grand Rapids. The candidates touched on a number of topics, including an issue that hits close to home for many right here in Metro Detroit, the war between Israel and Hamas.
Hypotheticals don't work in this. They have to defend themselves. You have to remember, Iran is coming at them through Hezbollah. Okay. Iran is coming at them through Hamas. Iran has attacked 200 installations across the Middle East since October 7th. The fact that she supported making sure that Saudi couldn't defend itself against the Houthis, taking the Houthis off the terrorist list, which, by the way, is now shooting at U.S. troops, including our Navy, in the Red Sea, making Iran have the capital by allowing them to sell oil into the market, has engulfed us in the Middle East. Bad decision, bad decision, bad decision.
For me, it's clear we need a ceasefire deal that brings the hostages home. Israel has the right to defend itself when people come and kill their citizens, rape women, shoot ballistic missiles at them. That is something that any country in the world has the right to do. But we can also say that we don't like seeing loss of life among civilians. Iran is now in a very interesting moment. Their big proxies have been killed or been wiped down in Hezbollah and Hamas, and they just fired a really strategic round of ballistic missiles, including hypersonic missiles. Israel has, again, the right to respond to that. But for me, what I won't do is I won't say that the United States should get back into a big land war in the Middle East.
The other thing they talked about, the thing most of you said was important to you in our poll, the economy. Both candidates were asked what they would do to bring down prices.
We have to absolutely become energy independent. I'm for an all of the above policy, but if we don't get gas prices down, we won't get food prices down. There is no sense from buying oil from Venezuela when we have capability here in this country. Regulation has to stop. $1.6 trillion in new regulation coming out of Washington, D.C. And lastly, spending. We have got to get our arms around spending.
For me, there's really three things that I've been working on doing that I believe in. Number one is bringing supply chains back home come from places like China. That includes the 44 manufacturing facilities that are being built right now in the state of Michigan. You need a good job with good benefits. Number two, it's attacking the primary costs that are just burning a hole in people's pockets. Healthcare, prescription drugs. We finally allowed Medicare to negotiate drug prices. You've got to bring down costs like housing, childcare. And then number three, you got to keep more money in your pocket that you earn, right? Taxes and tax policy. You got to do things like the Earned Child Tax Credit. Give credit to middle-class families instead of breaks to the ultra-wealthy.
Now, this isn't the only time you'll see Slotkin and Rogers on the debate stage before November 5th. They'll also take to the stage next Monday here in Detroit. Of course, we'll have full coverage of that one. And I should also mention that we have a call in to both Rogers and Slotkin to sit down for a town hall here on the Pulse. Stay tuned to see if they actually do that. We hope they will. The former ambassador is trying to do something in Michigan that hasn't been done since Senator Stabenow was first elected to the upper chamber. And that has one of Michigan's 2 Senate seats occupied by a Republican. The last person to do that, it was the man Stabenow defeated in 2000, Spencer Abraham. Remember that name? After he left the Senate, he served as President George W. Bush's Secretary of Energy. The latest poll shows Congresswoman Slotkin leading by 5 percentage points. Vice President Harris tackling something she's been criticized a lot for. Former President Trump says she only sat down for friendly interviews like the one with Oprah. Now she's on a media blitz, which included a stop on 60 Minutes where she was pressed on how she'd pay for expanding the child care tax credit, tax breaks to first-time home buyers and people starting small businesses. She said that would involve raising taxes on the rich.
It is not right that teachers and nurses and firefighters are paying a higher tax rate than billionaires and the biggest corporations. And I plan on making that fair.
But we're dealing with the real world here.
But the real world includes...
How are you going to get this through Congress?
You know, when you talk quietly with a lot of folks in Congress, they know exactly what I'm talking about because their constituents know exactly what I'm talking about. Their constituents are those firefighters and teachers and nurses.
Harris also ventured into the daytime talk show circuit, appearing on The View. She was asked if there was anything she would have done differently than President Biden in the last 4 years.
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact. Yeah. The work that we have done, for example, capping the cost of insulin at $35 a month for our seniors is something I care deeply about allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices and bring the cost of prescription medication down for seniors, but my intention is to expand that for all Americans. The work we have done to invest in American industries, whether it be in terms of manufacturing and creating almost 800,000 new jobs around manufacturing. Those are all a shared priority.
Harris didn't just go the TV route. She also appeared on Howard Stern's radio show, as well as the podcast Call Her Daddy, a podcast that's really popular with young women. On the other side of the ticket for the Republicans now, in another Michigan visit, former President Trump's running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, was in Detroit this afternoon. Vance mentioned the issues that really were expected to be talked about, like immigration and the auto industry. But he also criticized the answer you just heard from Harris's appearance on The View. Take a listen.
Kamala Harris's entire campaign is to pretend that she hasn't been the vice president for the last 3.5 years. You know, she stands up before crowds and she'll say, on day one, we're going to tackle the affordability crisis. On day one, we're going to secure the border. And you listen to her for 5 minutes and you think, Kamala, are you going to vote for Donald Trump because you've been vice president for 1,400 days? You haven't done anything.
That was J.D. Vance at a place that you may go to every weekend, Eastern Market. The man at the top of the ticket, former President Trump, is speaking at the Detroit Economic Club later on this week. That speech will happen this coming Thursday. Back now to Harris for a second. Her campaign sent an email to supporters saying they need more money. That email included this graph, which says that fundraising dip has actually been pretty significant in the last few days. We told you about the large amounts of cash the campaign raked in when she first joined the race, but this is in the last few days. She sent this email out to her followers saying that this is something that needs to be addressed. The email did not include specific numbers, as you see here, but once both campaigns release those for the month of September, we, of course, will go by the numbers as we do here on The Pulse. Well, we're turning back to the media blitz, but from a wider angle. One candidate decided to sit down with 60 Minutes, facing tough questions. The other did not. We're talking to a PR guru about both strategies. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, you know what we're doing, covering people, power, and politics. VP Harris has sat down with 60 Minutes after being criticized for not doing enough hard-hitting sit-down interviews. And former President Trump decided not to do that 60 Minutes interview because he didn't like the network wanting to fact-check his interview. But there's more. He wanted an apology from CBS for comments he said were made about Hunter Biden's laptop in 2020. Ultimately, it was for something that host Leslie Stahl never said. Joining us now is public relations guru Matt Friedman. It's always good to see you. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
Thanks, Rube.
Joining us here on The Pulse, talking about a really important topic, exposure. And this critical time in the campaign, the #1 criticism, well, let's face it, there was a lot of criticism both of these candidates are facing. But one of the big ones for Harris, not sitting down for serious sit-down interviews. What did you make of the 60 Minutes interview that she did?
I think it met the high expectations of the 60 Minutes audience. If you watch 60 Minutes, you're expecting the legacy of Mike Wallace to continue. You're expecting tough questions of powerful people, and that happened with Bill Whitaker. At the same time, if you were expecting that of Donald Trump, you didn't get that last night. And I credit CBS for being very clear with their audience about how that went down.
And as Scott Pelley, the anchor, I would imagine taking management notes from CBS News and putting together a presentation essentially explaining what had happened here. And he says that the former president basically said, look, I don't necessarily want to sit down and get fact check every step of the way. And I need an apology from Leslie Stahl and from CBS from what happened in 2020. Do you think there's any credence to what he's saying there? Or do you believe that perhaps he is doing, in his mind, his campaign's smart move, which is to try to avoid the media?
My colleagues and I have prepared hundreds of people to be interviewed in news programs. Being fact-checked is part of doing an interview. If I said something untrue right now and you knew it to be untrue, you would fact-check me right here. I would expect you to.
Sure.
It's part of the deal. It's part of the package. And to demand that that doesn't happen is completely unrealistic with any real news organization.
And the blame that Kamala Harris was feeling up until now, which was not sitting down to do serious interviews, sitting down with Oprah Winfrey and MSNBC, with all due respect to our media colleagues at MSNBC, that interview was pretty soft. The Oprah interview was equally soft. And so she finally sat down and faced the music, so to speak. Do you think she'll get credit for that, or do you think that'll wipe away some points on the polls?
I'm not sure really who's keeping score here, because I think different audiences are going to see different things.
Sure.
But I think that argument is out of the mix now, because she did 60 Minutes. That's considered the top of the line when it comes to broadcast tough interviews, and that gives her a little more license to do things like the podcasts, like The View, like Howard Stern, which the modern presidential candidate in the month before an election should be doing.
Okay, let's talk about some of the other things that we'll go to Harris and then to Trump. Kamala Harris was on a popular podcast called Call Her Daddy. That's a video podcast and also a podcast. Why is it important for these candidates? Because you're a messaging guy, you're a messaging guru, and we're talking about politics. You talk about companies, politics, all of it. How important is it for these traditional candidates to seek non-traditional ways to get their message out?
It's imperative if you're trying to get younger people to vote. I mean, we have to face the facts on who watches traditional TV. It's mostly 55 plus, people older than 55.
60 Minutes,
for example,
right?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at that audience, it's probably 65 plus. So if you want to reach younger voters, you need to go where they are. And
Call Her Daddy.
Call Her Daddy is an example of that. But they also get big numbers there. 5 million is the estimated audience for that podcast. Now, let me tell you something. That's about the nightly audience of Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC combined. So they're reaching numbers in a comfortable, relatively casual format, getting right into voters' ears in a pretty intimate way. Like, audio is more intimate than video. It's more personal.
Yeah, and 60 Minutes actually ended up with something like 5.4 million views, according to Nielsen, because they switched the day. It wasn't on the traditional Sunday day. They did it on another day. The former president, Donald Trump, has largely only taken questions so far from friendly interviews. He's done interviews with Fox News repeatedly. And And Fox News, although they've toughened up and been more critical of this, of former President Trump and his campaign, still it's been considered an easier interview. What do you think he should be doing with 20-some days left until the election?
Well, he has been known throughout this campaign to take questions out on the campaign trail. Right. And he really should be doing more of that. Because issues come up all the time. You know, that debate is almost ancient history because it's been a couple of weeks. The world changes fast. And so these candidates should not only be doing sit-down formal interviews, but they should be talking to the press pool that travels with them about the news of the day. We've seen the vice president do that a few times. We were seeing the former president do that more earlier in the campaign, and I think that would be a good thing for them to be doing every time they're out in front of their traveling press.
Now, let's talk about local media. We are on a local media station as we talk about this. So, of course, as you can imagine, people like me advocate for exposure to local media. We think it's important that people without agendas who are members of this community have access to Donald Trump and to Kamala Harris and to J.D. Vance and to Mr. Walz. Should they be doing more local interviews?
I'd like to see that. I think local news is viable. Local news reaches a relatively big audience. They're buying advertisements in your newscast every night. Right. So they obviously value your audience. Why not talk more directly to their audience through somebody locally who's trusted here in the market? I think it makes a lot of sense. I'd like to see it.
Let's talk about social media for a moment here. Social media, you can take one little soundbite. I know I did an interview with former President Trump. It was 14 minutes long when I did the interview in May, and one part of it where I asked him about questions about Venezuela, where for a moment he was stumped and he said, I'm not sure where those numbers came from when I asked him where they came from. That was used by so many people on the left to say, look at this guy, you know, and they used my soundbite on social media, but it wasn't the 14-minute totality of the interview. How accurate is social media in capturing the mood and tone of a campaign?
We're stuck with it, whether it works or not. And then we're stuck with it in business. They're stuck with it in politics. We can talk about the TikTok generation all we want, and we can maybe say that in a demeaning way. But the fact of the matter is the TikTok generation can vote. And they're also viable consumers in the marketplace with disposable income. And they see news through that prism. And we, as content people, have to be able to recognize that and speak accordingly.
And that's why the Biden administration in the last 4 months actually put the call out to hire someone who could actually produce TikTok and Instagram videos for the White House, for the campaign. That's how important it is to these men and women.
The flip side is candidates, business people alike are afraid that if they say the wrong thing, they're going to become a social media meme in a matter of minutes. And that's one of the reasons why they aren't doing the interviews like they used to.
And so finally, in terms of reach, it is not one thing anymore. You can't just sit down and do a 60 Minutes interview. That's 5.4 million people. That has to then be shared on social media, which then has to be reshared and reshared, right?
There's no such thing as mass media anymore. It's personal media. And I encourage everybody listening to me say this. Think about, what are you listening to in the car? What are you watching when you get home? It's not necessarily what everybody's watching. It's what you want to watch. It's what you want to listen to. It's what you want to read. That's the way we all consume information now. And whether you're a political campaign or a business marketer, you have to adapt to that new reality.
And that's what they're doing right now. That's why you have, like it or not, the vice president on Call Her Daddy, Howard Stern, The Late Show, The View, and then again on 60 Minutes. And this is something that I'm sure the Trump team is working on now in terms of their media plan. Hopefully part of their media plan is sitting down with local media. Harris, Trump, if you're watching this right now, if your team's watching, come on the pulse. We will be here. It is so good to see you, Matt Freeman.
You too, Roop. Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Well, it's something Flint is very familiar with. Now the president is announcing a plan to get lead out of water pipes across the country. The timetable he's putting in place for some cities. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. And welcome back to The Pulse, looking at everything people, power, and politics on this Tuesday night. And we're talking about some changes here in Michigan as well as across the nation. It's been a decade now since the Flint water crisis, which forever changed that community and helped sound the alarm on the dangers of lead in tap water. And now President Biden is setting a deadline to make sure all drinking water in the U.S. is safer.
And over the years, we've only chipped away at the problem. But chipping at the problem hasn't fully solved it. It's taken too long. Hasn't been given a high enough priority until now. Folks, as Kamala would say, this is the United States of America, for God's sake. There's no safe level of lead exposure, period. None.
And while in Wisconsin today, he said cities across the U.S. need to replace their lead pipes in 10 years. We're talking close to 9 million pipes. The administration is allotting $15 billion for its thorough bipartisan infrastructure bill. We're told the 10-year time frame won't start for 3 years, giving water utilities time to get ready for the change. The EPA says lead-contaminated water can cause brain damage, heart disease, and even cancer. In the meantime, the president says he's postponing his trip to Germany and Angola so he can stay at the White House to monitor Hurricane Milton, which continues to make its way toward Florida. It's expected to be the most powerful hurricane to hit the Tampa Bay area in a century. As evacuations continue, highways have been getting increasingly jammed. More than 1,000 gas stations are out of fuel, and many store shelves have been emptied. Officials are urging people not to wait to get out, saying in some areas the storm surge from this thing could be up to 15 feet high. Thousands of federal workers and rescue teams have already been sent to the area just in case. We talk a lot about national politics, but this story is local and has a lot of moms talking. Women who breastfeed are getting more protection here in Michigan, with a bill now heading to Governor Whitmer. Senate Bill 351 was introduced by Democrat Jeff Irvin in the May of last year. It expands breastfeeding rights in our state by prohibiting discrimination when it comes to using a breast pump or any other way a mother is feeding her child in a public place. According to testimony given before a Senate committee, 90% of Michigan families use this type of feeding for their kids. The bill, which will go into effect immediately, builds on the Breastfeeding Anti-Discrimination Act, which was passed by lawmakers in 2014, making Michigan one of the last states in the country to protect public breastfeeding. And finally tonight, people need them before they can legally drive. And now an expert from the University of Michigan is calling on the government to do the same for self-driving vehicles. Henry Liu heads up the school's Autonomous Vehicle Testing Center and says a national driver's test would actually help set standards to ensure the cars show basic skills like making left turns without traffic lights and stopping for kids in the road. In recent years, the cars have been involved in several high-profile crashes, prompting safety concerns. Liu says he's pushing for the driving test now because he predicts the self-driving cars will be widely used on U.S. roads in the next 5 to 10 years. And thanks for joining us tonight. Stay tuned. SE Cup is up next with Battleground. I'm Roop Raj. If you have any thoughts on the show, email me at roop.raj@fox.com. That's the Pulse for tonight. Have a good night.